Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed, June Q&A. I can't believe how fast this year has gone, to be honest.
It's been a very fast month, I think. There's lots of stuff happening, so...
Yeah, I would guess the reason why I can't believe it's been so fast is because it's been such a frustrating year, and it seems like nothing's really progressed or improved to this point, which usually drags it out, but at the same time, I don't know, it's weird. Weird year. Last year was weird, but I think this year's been even weirder somehow.
Yeah, it's probably pretty weird for everyone, but yeah.
But anyway, June Q&A. So we've asked you guys to hit us with some questions, and hopefully we have some satisfactory answers to your questions. So we're going to go do that now. We'll grab them out and we'll get into it. So let's do it. Today's video sponsor is Thermal Grizzly and their Cryonaut Extreme, which is now available in a 2-gram syringe. This high-performance thermal paste delivers maximum thermal conductivity thanks to an extremely small particle size and layer thickness. It's also very flexible, capable of standing up to sub-zero temperatures for extreme overclocking, but also performs exceptionally well for air and water cooling applications. So if your CPU or GPU needs repasting, then I suggest checking out the Thermal Grizzly range. Link is in the video description. Alright, we've got a question here from Gamer Nexus. Gamers Nexus, have you heard of them? Yes. Oh, well, anyway, they've asked
us... Are they
us...
like a small channel?
I think they do tech stuff, or maybe it's a bike review channel, I'm not sure. Anyway, they've got a question, so we should probably be polite and answer it. Will you come build us a shed? Your shed build is insane. Actually, if you can just ship it to us, that'd be great. UPS should be fine. So that is, of course, Steve from Gamers Nexus, who we certainly know who Steve is, and the Gamers Nexus channel. For those of you who are a bit confused by this question, for our Patreon and Floatplane members, I did a series where I built a shed and I made a couple of behind-the-scenes videos, uploaded them, and I talked with Steve behind the scenes and I shared some of it with him, and he was very impressed with the shed, so that was nice. I imagine as I'm talking right now, we're probably seeing some kind of preview shed BTS stuff that Tim will have done, so good job to editing, Tim.
Look, it's pretty impressive for you to have built something like this by yourself or close to it.
For a bit more background, I like... doing trade type stuff. I like building things and all that. I've been doing that for years, and I needed a shed. So as you can imagine, as the channel's grown and we get sent more stuff to look at, or companies are hoping we'll look at stuff and they send stuff, even though I'm like, please don't send that, I don't have room, they send it anyway. So my wife's laundry was full of boxes. The studio was getting to the point where I couldn't move things around to film B-roll. I just had a lot of boxes, basically.
Way too much to burn, which is why you had to stop doing that and build a shed.
So, I built a shed to move a lot of that product out of, at least stuff I'd looked at. Even with test systems, I've got, like, no joke, like 30 test systems, because even old ones, I don't want to get rid of them, because maybe we want to look at a Core 2 Duo thing again if it's working. So I store them down in the shed. So that's the reason why I built a shed, also for other family-related stuff. But anyway, that's, I guess to answer the question, I'd love to build Steve from Gamers Nexus a shed. If we were local, I absolutely would build a shed with Steve. That would be the most fun ever. Shipping it could be a problem. Not sure UPS is up to the task. But yeah, maybe we can benchmark some couriers by making sheds and getting them to send them. In your Intel versus AMD value video, there were 2 motherboards with very similar VRM configurations, which ran the 11700 and the 5800X at the same VRM temperature, even though the 11700 was limited to 125 watt and the 5800X had a higher power limit. I think the 11700 was probably limited to 65 watts, but anyway, it doesn't. I won't. At what point do we call out motherboard manufacturers for making expensive, poor quality Intel motherboards? That's interesting. The Intel motherboard with an extra phase or VRM phase was performing worse at a lower power budget, and then Intel motherboards often cost more as well. Okay, so quite a few different things there. This is something I probably should have delved into a bit more in that content piece, but it was sort of a discovery I made towards the end of it, and it wasn't as shocking as I thought. Well, it's probably not the right way to put it. It wasn't until you combine, obviously, the VRM temperature with the power usage that it does come across as being a bit more shocking than what you may have expected. But of course, with VRM temperatures, it's down more to the capacity. So how many amps you're pulling through that VRM, opposed to the watts at the end result. So there can be some difference in there that will impact temperatures. Again, that's something I should have explored a bit more, which I didn't in that video because I'd already done all the testing. It wasn't until I pieced it together that stood out as being a bit odd. But what I can address is, like, when are we going to call out motherboard manufacturers for making terrible Intel motherboards? It's kind of funny because that was a massive problem for AMD motherboards forever. Obviously, motherboard manufacturers, they really focus their resources where they think they're going to generate the most sales. And at the moment, there's very little interest in Intel platforms for the guys that make the motherboards, like, Asus, MSI, Gigabyte. For OEMs like Dell and that, there's probably still a very strong demand for Intel systems. So don't take what I mean there to cover all different areas of PCs. But yeah, basically, the Intel motherboards do seem a bit rushed from certain brands. They do seem to have cheaped out and not put as much time and effort into them as they would have previously or historically if Intel was the more dominant force in the space. But also, what's the cost difference for them to buy a B560 chipset versus a B550? I don't actually have the answer.
It wouldn't be public, that information.
No, I don't know if anyone's done some sort of investigation to work that. I know Gamers Nexus did a fair bit of chipset cost analysis. I'm not sure how far they got with it or how confident they were in the information. But basically, we don't know is the answer. But historically, from what we've heard, Intel does charge more than AMD for chipsets. This is quite a few years old, this information that I've heard from AIB, so perhaps that's changed. But it could very well be a situation where Intel's just charging more. So they've got a set budget to make these entry-level boards, and if they hit that budget, then some corners have to be cut.
And Intel runs into the problem this generation, as we've talked about many times, of they basically need the motherboards to be better because the power requirements for Intel CPUs are higher this generation.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, we've talked about, once you're stuck on 14 nanometer for a while, you start to run into these problems, and it does hurt these more value-oriented boards. It's not as much of an issue with Z590 where you can buy an expensive product and they'll put in this super beefy overkill VRM and that's all fine. But certainly for things like, B560, all these things come to play. If the chipsets are more expensive, then that's going to cause a reduction in VRM quality when realistically Intel needs the better VRM.
Okay, now that Intel is getting into the GPU market, do you think we'll be seeing unique features but not limited to DLSS that'll benefit gamers using their cards specifically? Or do you think they'll go the AMD route and have the features open? I think this one's fairly obvious, but I should never say that. My opinion would be that they're going to go down the more open features route because they don't have a user base, really.
Yeah.
Apart from,
totally agree.
integrated graphic users. But when it comes to discrete graphics, Intel's nowhere. So they can't afford to come out with a proprietary DLSS type feature because, who's going to buy their stuff to get locked into that straight off the bat?
Yeah, that's it. I think a lot of companies develop proprietary locked features to try and create that, the walled garden ecosystems where you're locked in, you get used to using those features on that brand's products, and then, that incentivizes you to buy their cards because you might have bought a 20 series GPU with DLSS, you still want that feature, so you're going to buy, a 40 series card for the next generation. But you can only do that from basically a dominant market position.
Yeah.
If you want people to invest in your platform for the first time, you don't want to put them off by then, saying, well, we're going to lock you into all these things. And it's not going to incentivize people as much because they're going to have to move away from, all these features that they've been used to and potentially disincentivize the lock-in. So, Intel might be able to get away with something like that for CPUs, especially in prior years when they were very strongly dominant in CPUs. But for GPUs, I think it would just be a total fail. It wouldn't.
No, you won't see it.
I don't see many people getting attracted over to Intel DLSS when you could just buy an Nvidia GPU, and that's more mature in a bunch of ways, which will almost certainly be the case when these GPUs are released. So, I think Intel's comments about being interested in technologies like FSR tend to sort of show the way that Intel is going to go with something like that.
Definitely.
So I think that this looks a bit like a follow-up question to the Intel question that we just had. Do you think AMD's decision to make FSR an open source technology is a good idea? Is this a clever move by them, seeing as Nvidia are well known for trying to strong-arm people down their proprietary route? Would the future of tech be a better place if we had more open source technologies like this? So again, AMD kind of didn't have a choice but to make FSR an open technology in a similar way to Intel, in that
It certainly helped.
they're not in a dominant market position, so it makes it harder to sell proprietary features. And we've seen that before with things like FreeSync.
Yep.
FreeSync wouldn't have been as successful if it was locked to AMD GPUs. And I think AMD's strategy here is very different to what Nvidia is trying to achieve. AMD is trying to not necessarily sell people on AMD GPUs through FSR specifically. You're not going to necessarily buy an AMD GPU to use FSR because it also works on Nvidia GPUs. But what they're trying to do is minimize the selling point of DLSS by making it open. So it's kind of, they're not attracting people, they're trying to detract people from their competitors' product and what they've built.
Yep.
So, and that's really the only strategy that I think was potentially a play for them long term. And things like making it open source encourage developers to use it. It makes it a bit easier to integrate. And I guess that comes down to the tech as well being
all of that said,
easier.
They didn't have to make it work on NVIDIA GPUs to achieve any of those things.
But it certainly helps.
I'm not sure. I think it's... ultimately, we'd probably have to ask them what their motivation was for doing that, because, again, I see what you're saying. It incentivizes developers to focus on FSR opposed to DLSS because more of their customers can benefit from that work.
Yeah, I think if you're a developer and you've only got a limited amount of resources to use, then you could integrate DLSS, which is going to capture a portion of the gaming market, or use FSR, which is going to capture all gamers. And I think that's the strategy AMD is trying to play there.
It doesn't, like we've seen games that are hugely popular are generally multiplayer games that are easy to run.
Yeah.
So people can enjoy it on just about any hardware, whether it's like League of Legends or Fortnite. Or
stuff that runs on APUs on laptops is super popular.
So if you can include a technology in your game that allows it to run on way more hardware, then that's what you would prioritize, because that, it expands your install base. So that's one of the reasons why they would have done it. Also, does it win AMD some favor by helping out people with lowly Pascal GPUs still trying to get by, and then all of a sudden, for the very similar quality, they're looking at 30-40% more performance? That's a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's, from that sense, again, it's not going to sell you necessarily on an AMD GPU, but it helps their brand. So that
I'm not saying it's going to convert everybody, but all I'm getting is if you bought, a GTX 1060 and Nvidia is no longer prioritizing you for driver optimization, you're seeing performance get worse and worse in new games, which happens anyway. I'm not saying they're gimping the performance or anything. Games become more demanding, but then the competitor comes along and hands you like 30-40% more performance.
It certainly helps with their perception. I think it would help, the next time you want to upgrade and,
you'd consider them at least.
Yeah, there's an AMD GPU that is, competitive on a whole bunch of other stuff. And that's just one of those things that could tip you over, being like, oh, well, they did that thing. So that's the thing that works in their favor, I think.
I know it was certainly... If I was someone who always bought GeForce and didn't consider a Radeon GPU, I know that would at least get me to consider.
Yeah, so part of this question says, would the future of tech be a better place if we had more open source technologies like this? Again, it's one of those... It depends. We love saying it depends on this channel.
You could easily say yes, obviously, because, but would we have got FSR without DLSS?
Exactly, and I think, companies... obviously, ideally, everything would be open source. That would be amazing if everything was. But, companies aren't necessarily as willing to invest in open source solutions.
You don't get that arms race.
Yeah, you don't get the, companies develop things for their own self-interest to sell you more products, and making things open source doesn't serve those goals as well. So you kind of run this balancing act of, it would be nice if everything was open source, but if you want the best technology, then sometimes proprietary development is needed to get those high quality features. And then, as we've seen with DLSS, that incentivizes competition. So you've released DLSS, and then competitors, and it's not just AMD, it's other game engine developers that try and develop their own technologies. They see what's possible, they try and work to compete with it, to support on new platforms and that sort of thing. So I think both approaches can be beneficial to consumers in the long term. It's just about making sure that when you do make proprietary tech, that it doesn't unnecessarily lock you down into certain things that aren't required. Like, for example, a tech that, imagine if DLSS was locked down to just 30 series GPUs. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. So you wouldn't want that to happen. All right, Steve, since I've been doing the FSR video and I've tested it and I've given my thoughts, I'm really interested to hear your answer to this. Question to both of you. Did FSR meet your expectations? So obviously we did a video when they announced it that did detail our expectations. So you can go back and watch that to hear everything we had to say.
What did I say my expectation was? Did I say?
I think both of us sort of skirted around it saying that we thought it would be not as good as DLSS 2.0, but better than 1.0, somewhere in the middle. And
that seemed like a safe assumption, just logically. So I think that's fair. Okay, yep.
So yeah, now that you've seen how the tech works, you've watched a bunch of the reviews, and do you think that it met what you were expecting it to do?
Well, let's just say, to start off with, that DLSS 1.0 and then DLSS 2 or 1.0, like that's a lot of wriggle room is what I'm trying to get at. So that's what I'm saying. It was pretty safe to go. It's going to be better than 1.0, probably won't be as good as 2.0. A huge rift in between of where it could end up. So let's just say that we didn't really nail down what our expectations were there. It was a bit of it. I didn't expect it. Look, I know Cortex said that this was going to happen, and I remember commenting and thinking, okay, well, we'll see. I didn't think they were going to announce it. They did announce it. They even showed some tech demos, and what they showed was a bit iffy. So it's happened quite quickly, and I haven't really had a chance to sort of even think about it too much. And I haven't thought about it too much because I've focused on doing what I do because I knew Tim would take care of it. But I think it has exceeded my expectations. I didn't think it would be quite as good as what it is. I think maybe somewhere between balanced and quality was probably where I was expecting the best case to be.
I think I say it's pretty similar to what I was expecting. I think, I obviously heard the rumors, and we got a very small teaser of FSR at their Computex presentation, which is sort of the first time we learnt about it.
Yeah, really.
And, I had, I don't know, reasonable expectations, but then later AMD briefed us on how it worked in a bit more detail. We're talking about, it's not a temporal solution, it's a spatial solution. It doesn't use AI. And I think when I learnt about those things, my expectations dropped because I thought, well, knowing about how things like DLSS worked, I thought, it's going to be hard to compete with a technology like that without doing similar things to what DLSS does. So I think, and once I saw some of those demos, I was like, I don't know, maybe they haven't quite nailed it here. But then when I actually used it, I think I agree. It did. I was expecting maybe like balanced or quality to be the peak of what it could do. And then, it turns out it was a little bit better than that. Still not the quality of DLSS 2.0, which we talked about in the video, but there was definitely moments during testing where I had to double check whether the feature was on or not in the ultra quality mode, that's a pretty positive sign. And I certainly, when I saw those things, I'm sort of like, okay, that sort of it surprised me a little bit. I was expecting it to be a bit more noticeable, the quality drop in those modes. So, and we just have to now wait and see about things like the game support list. I think in that regard, the game support is something that didn't really surprise me. I was expecting poor support at launch, or certainly, previously we'd seen AMD demo things in things like Ashes of the Singularity, a game that people don't really play, and I was expecting very similar this time with things like Godfall, and we did see that. So again, now it's about them sort of executing on that and improving it. So we'll see. But certainly a very promising start, and I think that's reflected in a lot of people's opinions on it as well. So I think AMD sort of, did an okay job this time. Next question. Why do you think it is that we never really saw a version of the checkerboard rendering techniques that are pretty common on console releases on PC? DLSS and FSR are good, yes, but it seemed odd that Nvidia and AMD have worked on new technologies rather than implementing something that already exists on console, which works decently well already. Is it that checkerboard rendering is not as performant, i.e. the performance increase is nowhere near as dramatic as it can be with DLSS or FSR, or do you think there is another reason? So, complicated topic. I think checkerboard rendering, you can see it in some games, and you've seen similar, temporal upscaling solutions in, I'd say, a fairly small selection of games. Usually it's not a feature that's enabled in PC releases, or, they've developed it for console and then chosen not to enable it for PC. And I think that's for a number of reasons. The main one for me is that, checkerboard rendering and some of those techniques do introduce artifacts. But when you're viewing it at 30 FPS, usually with copious amounts of motion blur on a TV that you're viewing from, a fair way away, you're not using a 4K monitor right in front of your face. You might be using a 1080p TV from far back. A lot of the artifacts and issues are much harder to notice. A lot of console games have a very soft presentation, which I don't think would cut it on PC, where gamers are more interested in texture quality and things like that. So those techniques that do have issues, I mean, you can just, crank up the blur, lower the resolution, lower the frame rate, and you don't notice it as much. Whereas with the PC, if you enabled checkerboard rendering, and we saw, I'm not sure whether games like Watch Dogs 2 technically use checkerboard rendering. You'd have to ask Digital Foundry on that. They'd be up to speed on all that. But certainly the temporal solution, whatever they used in that game, looked pretty good on console. But then you bring it close to you, you start to notice the fringing and combing effects. You start to notice the issues between the frames. And I think that's only accentuated at higher frame rates. If you see things like flickering, at a low frame rate, it's harder to notice a flicker than a really, if something flickers a lot, then the higher the frame rate is, it strobes more and more and more. So I think all those issues kind of dampened the need to, or dampened the quality that you would get out of checkerboard rendering. And again, lots of PC gamers turn off motion blur. So if you turn off motion blur, you can't blur the image as much to hide some of those things. So yeah, I think that's why. I don't think it's as much the performance reasons. Certainly prior to DLSS, there was no other option. That would have given you the performance boost. But yeah, I think what we've seen in some of those games that did enable it, it just wasn't quite good enough for PC users. Steve is relaxing because that means it's monitor question time.
I hope you weren't going to notice, to be honest. But anyway, carry on.
When the first wave of FALD HDR 1000 monitors launched a few years ago, a lot of reviewers recommended to wait for some time for a new cheaper wave of products without early adopter fees. However, it never really launched. Only now we are starting to see a new wave of such monitors, mostly with mini LED and for similar prices compared to the previous gen. Why has this price drop haven't really happened, and when do you expect it to happen? So I think why it hasn't happened is probably because it turns out it's quite complicated. It's a complex, costly method, and I think even now they're still kind of struggling a little bit to come up with cheaper ways to put lots and lots of LEDs in the backlight to make those mini LED designs. So yeah, and obviously with the first wave you had problems like, for example, not having enough bandwidth through the DisplayPort and HDMI ports to run at the full specifications of the monitor. We needed technologies like DSC, and that might increase costs as well. So yeah, I think monitor manufacturers have probably taken a bit too long to try to figure out all this stuff. They probably should have had their act together a bit before now. But yeah, I guess you need sort of incremental updates, and we haven't really seen too much of that happening, which is just a bit unfortunate. So hopefully it will happen from now on, but I guess we sort of said that last time, as this question asker has pointed out, it didn't really happen. So yeah, I think once we start solving all of those problems and they become much more attractive buys to people, and more people start jumping on board and that sort of thing, then there'll be more pressure to bring it down the chain, which hopefully will occur not too far away from now.
Given the Nvidia and LG situations that have happened, let's look in the opposite direction. Do you have any notable examples / stories of brands having reacted particularly well to your negative feedback or reviews? For instance, making a really obvious point to legitimately act upon your feedback addresses your concerns. Well, yes, we have. So I had to think about that for a second. Are we going to name names on stuff like this, or I guess
they've reacted pretty well? I mean,
positive, I suppose. That's fine, isn't it? Yeah. Sorry, I just had to think that whole thing through.
I'd say most companies, again, whenever we talk about this, most companies do react pretty well.
Well, I mean, yeah. The LG video is something that I know people are like, oh, you guys are always creating so much drama. It's like, well, I mean, I don't know what you want us to do when we see this kind of behavior. Just turn a blind eye to it or take some money to ignore it. We pointed out, and yeah, there was the Nvidia situation. ASRock's quietly blacklisted us as well as Gamers Nexus and probably some other people. And then the LG situation, which was bizarre.
Yep.
But apart from that, there hasn't really... Is there anything I'm missing?
No, those are only the really bad sort of...
Yeah, there's been little things here and there that we've addressed quickly. But like when we trashed the MSI motherboards, MSI took that really well.
Didn't they like fly out an engineer to your house to speak to you and stuff?
They got really involved, and not in the way they were trying to manipulate anything. They weren't having a go at us. They weren't trying to intimidate. They were like, yep. Like their messaging was really clear. They straight away said, those results are disappointing. We have verified them in-house. We're very disappointed. We are committed to doing better, and we would like to have a meeting and have a bit of a chat about things. And basically I told them what we expect, why we thought the boards were bad, and what they have to do better. And they went away and they did it. We got the Unify, the Tomahawk. So they revamped a bit of the X570 range. You know, I didn't love that they were still selling those boards that we thought were garbage, even at discounted prices, but they weren't technically broken, I suppose. They just weren't as good as they should have been. Asus sort of messed us around a bit with the Strix thing, claiming it was BIOSes and they were going to fix it, and they dragged their feet on that, and it turned out it was a completely flawed method of... So I think that was the first time we really dealt with them. So they were trying different ways to get out of handling it properly. But since then, we've had a few issues with Asus, and they've been really good at addressing them. So they've definitely improved things there.
I think whenever these questions come up about, how do companies handle negative feedback? I'd say like at least half the time, you just don't hear anything. So you publish a negative review, and then it's just... that's out in the world. That's it. It's done. Companies have obviously taken it. Another thing that's very common is companies will ask you clarifying questions. So, for example, you make a review and you say something in particular that's bad about it, then they'll be like, oh, you only talked about that in your video for like a minute or maybe 30 seconds. We want to get some more feedback on that so that we can understand your point or want to make it better or whatever. That's... Most negative reviews fall in one of those two categories, and so usually most companies do pretty similar stuff. But there are some examples like what you've been talking about with MSI, where I guess they have gone a bit above and beyond to try and fix the products and make them good. A
little more info there. I've tested all of these X570 motherboards, and the MSI boards tested very poorly. So sometimes that's due to, we were talking about BIOSes at some point, sometimes that's due to a bad BIOS that's overvolting or doing things wrong. I couldn't see anything wrong with the BIOS, but it could be switching frequency or anything. So I reached out to MSI, I said, look, here are the results, they're really bad. Is there anything you guys can do to solve this? And they sort of said, yeah, those results can't be right initially. We'll look into it for you. And to their credit, they looked at it like that night. They got, the team got in and did the testing. The next morning, I got a detailed report. And basically just read was, we're really disappointed that, your results are accurate under those test conditions. Yeah, our boards don't stand up very well. So we don't have anything further for you. And they weren't like, don't publish that, or they just said, it's disappointing, we'll do better next time. So that was a great example, and I think we do see that more often than not.
Definitely, yeah. And it's often, even if we don't hear it back from the company at the time, like, again, it may be a situation where they just go silent, but then they'll pop up the following year and they have fixed a lot of the concerns with their product. And they're like, hey, we really want you to check this out because, we saw your review, you criticized these elements to the review, in the review, and now we've fixed them. So we want your feedback. We want you to see whether the product is now, up to your standards. So that's something that happens often as well. I think these Nvidia and LG situations, again, people, as you're saying, people tend to complain that we're creating drama or whatever. But the reality is that doesn't happen very often.
And those situations were weird. So like, Nvidia wasn't calling out any sort of thing we said in a review. It was more of a general thing they just didn't like. Our editorial direction. I mean, they said as much. They didn't like that we weren't gushing over ray tracing.
Yeah.
And we didn't focus on it heavily. That was their main criticism, as far as I recall.
Yeah. Same with LG. You don't see every day popping up in your email like, we want this review done in this way, or you can't do it, or we'll try pay you. Like, this is that is not how most companies handle these things. So, and again, we expose companies that do those things. So, I mean, that shows you how
it's happened
rare
twice. It's happened to those degrees. It's happened twice. And the other, unfortunate situation is a company like ASRock, who we've worked with since the company was founded. We called them out for some false advertising, essentially, with their Z490 motherboards once. And that was it. We haven't heard from them since. They cut ties and that was it.
So companies can be disappointed, angry, annoyed at negative reviews from time to time, but it doesn't usually get to that.
No, that's weird. It's handled very poorly. Can't imagine it'll have a good outcome for them, but
yeah, well.
Okay, we're going to hit pause there. A lot of fun, mostly FSR related questions, but good to get Tim's opinion and my opinion. I guess it's the first time we've really got together and talked about that since your video went live, so that's cool.
That's right. Yep.
And some other stuff thrown in there as well. You probably mix the questions up as you do anyway. So hopefully that made sense. Hopefully a lot of the FSR questions were in this section. If not, you guys will be confused. But anyway, a lot of good questions as usual. So that's going to do it for part 1. Part 2 will be coming up on the channel very shortly, and then we will have a part 3 sometime thereafter, which will be again a mix of questions, because you're not doing the part 3 Patreon anymore, are you?
Just a mix of everything. It depends what
we're working all of this out right now on camera. So now Tim and I have had a strategy meeting. He'll go make those necessary edits. Thanks for watching. Thanks for those of you who support us, and if you'd like to support us directly, we have Floatplane and Patreon.
That's right.
So you can sign up there. What do we get? Monthly live stream, Q&A stuff, behind the scenes content. Tim's doing a Lego live stream build, I heard.
Yeah, it should be happening soon on the channel. We just did the normal live stream with both of us, but Lego building live stream has been hotly requested.
I'm tuning in for it, for sure.
We'll get on that soon.
I'll do some benchmarking while I watch you build some Lego. That should be good. And Discord.
Yep.
We have an exclusive Discord community. It's an awesome place. So if you love talking tech and want to pick Tim's brain over monitor or something like that, you can do it there. Anyway, probably a long enough outro on this one. So I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.